Morning, everybody. Okay, so today you guys are doing all different types of text structure, kind of reviewing, practicing with them. So you guys have a copy of this. So what this is for is if you didn't attend our live Google Meet, I am going to post this afterwards so that if you need to kind of go back and look at it, you can. I'm going to walk through each passage and just kind of explain what we're noticing and why, so that can hopefully help you if you are stuck. All right, so you guys have this text structure. This page is super helpful. You guys can come back to it at any point. This basically just goes over the different types of text structure and just a little bit about them, some signal words, so words to look out for. You guys have seen all of these before except this one, description. So that one might look a little new to you because I haven't introduced that one to you guys yet. Description basically is about a topic, idea, person, place, or thing that is described by listing its features, characteristics, or examples. So in other words, they talk about something and they mention what it sounds like, what it looks like, what it tastes like, basically just explaining, describing things in all different kinds of ways. So we have a fish here. We might talk about what it smells like. We might talk about what it feels like. We might talk about what it tastes like. So we're going to use words such as, for example, for instance, specifically, in particular, in addition. So that is text structure, or description for text structure. Chronological, we know, goes in order or time or sequence. So if they're talking about a car, for instance, they might use chronological because they might have a timeline or the different dates showing the progression of the car. Problem solution, it's pretty straightforward. There's a problem, talk about how they fixed it. Cause and effect, there's some kind of event going on and we see effect, what happened because of that event. And then compare and contrast, there's going to be two or more different things. So if you're just reading a book about just one type of penguin, it's probably not going to be compare and contrast. But if they have a book about all different types of penguins, it might be compare and contrast because maybe they talk about how some are similar, some are different. Okay, so let's start with the first one together. So the first one, the fire. So it says Daniel Sullivan was the first to notice the flames coming from the O'Leary barn at around 8:30 p.m. on October 8th. A problem with the barn alarm box made it possible for the people in the area to call for the fire department. By 9:30 p.m., the entire block was blazing. Another 3 hours, there were fires all over Chicago. The heavy wind coming from the lake only made the fire bigger. It would be another day before the fire would completely be out. By that time, 17,500 buildings had been burned. Okay, so we have a section here about a fire. There was like a phrase, like a problem kind of stood out to me because I'm like, oh, maybe it's problem solution. But then as I'm reading through, it doesn't seem like, the fire is a problem, obviously, but it doesn't really seem like they're really kind of focusing on that problem solution text structure. What I'm noticing is like they're being really specific about times. So we have this first one. The flames came to the barn around 8:30 p.m. on October 8th. And then we have a little later by 9:30 p.m. So the same day, an hour later, the entire block was blazing. Another 3 hours, there were fires all over Chicago. Another day. So it seems like they're kind of progressing in time, showing us how things progress with the fire. So if we think about that, well, what type of text structure talks about time or events? That would be chronological, right? So it's chronological because it's telling the events during the fire and when they happen. So we're kind of, if we can put things on a timeline, which we could here, that would be a good example of chronological. All right, next one is called icebergs. Icebergs, giant blocks of ice that float in the sea, come in many shapes, sizes, and colors. Some are deep blue or green. Some look like floating sculptures. Old icebergs that have been worn down by the weather sometimes look like pillars of ice. Usually, only about 1/5 of an iceberg appears above the surface of the water. The other 4/5 of the berg is hidden underwater, out of sight. Sometimes an iceberg has what's called a foot, an extension completely underwater. These are especially dangerous for ships. It was an iceberg foot that sank the Titanic in 1912, killing 1,503 people. Okay, so this one was kind of tricky for me because they started talking about icebergs in the beginning, but then they had this last sentence here about how it was an iceberg foot that caused the Titanic, that big boat that sank, to actually sink. So I'm like, well, maybe it's cause and effect. But then I'm just like, they mentioned that briefly at the very end, but I have to look at everything else they kind of mentioned. So in the beginning, they're talking about what the icebergs look like, and that's really the focus of this article, right? It's all about one thing, icebergs. So they talk about what colors they are, look like floating sculptures, only about 1/5, which is pretty interesting fact. 1/5 of the iceberg is what you can see above water, which means like a lot of it's underwater. So it seems like they're really focusing in on the iceberg and kind of describing all different types of features about it, like what it looks like. So if I think back to these types of text structure, which one talks about how things look like or describes them? And that would be description. So this entire section is describing what icebergs look like above and below the surface. So it's describing, explaining something to me. All right, let's try the next one. Sun bear. An endangered species, the sun bear, native to Southeast Asia, is an endangered species for two reasons. First, people in this part of the world hunt the bear for body parts, such as the gallbladder, the claws, and the meat. The body parts are valuable because some people believe that eating them will help heal broken bones and bruises. Ugh. They believe this because the sun bear appears to fall out of trees without injuring itself. Okay. Additionally, special restaurants serve bear paws and bear meat to diners who think that eating this kind of meat will bring good health. In addition to being hunted, the sun bear's habitat is being destroyed. The jungles where the sun bear live are being cleared to make way for homes and farms. Legendary beliefs that can be harmful to nature. Okay, so this entire section here is about the sun bear, and they're basically explaining why the sun bear is an endangered species. So that means that there's not a lot of them left. So they're in danger of being extinct. So if I kind of think about this, so they're talking about all of the different reasons why the sun bear is extinct. So it says it's a endangered species for two reasons. And it gives the first example and the second one. So when I think about what's going on here, well, they're explaining why the sun bear is extinct or is going to be extinct and is endangered. So to me, something that really kind of stands out, if I go through the different types of text structure, I don't think it's descriptive because it doesn't seem like it's really focusing on what the sun bear looks like. It's just more of explaining like why they're endangered. Chronological, there's no really events going into place. Problem solution, I mean, the problem is definitely they're in danger, but it doesn't really talk about a solution how to get them to not be endangered. Cause and effect could be cause and effect. Compare and contrast. I know it's not compare and contrast because there's not two different animals here. So it has to be cause and effect. So if I think about why, well, maybe the cause, there's multiple causes in this article or this section. So maybe one cause is that, or one thing that's happening, people hunt the bear for body parts. And as a result, as an effect, it's endangered. So there's also another cause in there. So additionally, special restaurants serve bear paws and bear meat to diners who think that eating will bring good health. So because they are serving this animal, you see this effect of it being endangered as well. They're hunted, and also something that's happening is their habitat is destroyed, and as a result, we're seeing that they're endangered. So this one actually has a couple of different causes, all connecting back to this effect that's happening. So because all of these things are happening, this is the result we see with the sun bear. So that's a good one, cause and effect. All right, this one's a long one, so we'll have to kind of stay in here. Beastly bee behavior. Scientists have a joke about killer bees. How can you tell the difference between a regular honey beehive and a killer beehive? Kick the hive and see how far you run. Regular bees might buzz you for 100 feet or so, explains insect expert Margaret McMichael, but killer bees might chase you for 2 miles. In many ways, killer bees and honeybees are similar. A killer bee sting is no more deadly than a regular bee sting. Like killer bees, all honeybees have venom, poison, in their stingers. In many ways, killer bees also behave like regular honeybees. For example, all bees attack when they think their hive is in danger. But some differences in behavior make killer bees more deadly than honeybees. Compared to ordinary honeybees, killer bees have quick triggers. Unlike a honeybee, it takes very little to get killer bees riled up. They can sense you walking from about 2 car lengths away, says Margaret. Big colonies, killer beehives can hold more than 50,000 bees. That is many more than a honeybee hive. When a killer beehive is disturbed, there are many more bees to react. Let's continue on here. Staying in power. When killer bees get angry, they will chase you much longer than honeybees will if they are angry. Smoke them out. Smoke makes them think their house is on fire, says Margaret. To get energy to fly away, they swallow a belly full of honey. It is hard to sting with a belly. Okay, so you guys might have picked up on it pretty quickly. I think I picked up on it pretty quickly, but I'm also the teacher. So when I think about what this article is about, so it's about bees, but it's not just about one bee. It's about two bees. We have the honeybee. We also have a killer bee. And what they're doing here is they are comparing, so it says compared to ordinary honeybees, killer bees have. So they're talking about how killer bees are different than honeybees, but they're also talking about how they are similar as well. So this is a great example of compare and contrast. So they're explaining the differences as well as the similarities between killer bees and honeybees. So a red flag that kind of went up in my mind was that they were talking about two different types of bees. So I know anytime they talk about two different types of animals or animals that are kind of like the same, they're probably talking somehow about how they're different as well and kind of comparing them. So that was a kind of signal in my mind that turns out that held true. All right, so last one here. Astronauts face weightlessness. Astronauts face many difficulties in space caused by weightlessness. One of the challenges is floating around the cabin. To solve this problem, astronauts wear shoes that are coated with a special adhesive. This adhesive sticks to the floor of the cabin. Serving food is another difficulty. It won't stay on the table. Experts solve this problem by putting food and drinks in pouches and tubes. Food is pre-processed and only needs to be mixed with water. Weightlessness makes the simple task of turning a doorknob or a wrench a real problem. Since there is no gravity to keep the astronaut down, when he exerts a force one way, the opposite force may flip him over completely. Being very careful about how much force one exerts to do these simple tasks usually solves these problems. On Earth, life is much simpler thanks to gravity. So this one kind of made it a little easy on us because I noticed some big keywords that kind of gave it away. So it kind of starts off, it's talking about this challenge that astronauts face called weightlessness. So they're talking about it can be a problem. So a couple of things that stood out in my mind. Experts solved this problem by putting foods and drinks in pouches and tubes. And then it also goes on to a little bit later. Let's see, being very careful about how much force one exerts to do these simple tasks usually solves these problems. So this one kind of made it, like I said, a little easy on us, but they had this problem of being weightlessness, and this entire section is talking about how they solved or fixed that problem. So this is a great one of problem solution. So the problems is what they face in space, which in this case is weightlessness. And they're telling us all the different ways they helped fix this weightlessness problem. I mean, they can't fix the problem, but because weightlessness, it is what it is in space, but they can do things to help solve this issue and make things a little bit easier on the astronauts there. All right, so we can kind of see text structure isn't as bad as we might have thought. It helps to look for some keywords. So we have this section, the fire, which is chronological, that had some different dates and times in it. So that kind of told us, okay, it's going in some kind of order. It's showing us how the fire progressed. Icebergs, this entire thing is all about how they look above and below surface. So that is a great descriptive example. This sun bear, we have this problem that they're endangered, or this effect that they're danger, and this entire section is about how they got endangered or what caused them to be endangered. It wasn't just one thing, it's multiple things there. Bee-sleep bee behavior, this one is talking about killer bee and honeybee, so it is compare and contrast how they're similar as well as how they're different. And then finally, we have this last one, which is problem solution. So all of these give us one example of the different types of text structure you guys will notice. So look out for those keywords. They really help me whenever I'm kind of deciding which text structure I'm noticing. Sometimes it's really obvious, like an article like this, but sometimes it's not. So we have to kind of just pay attention to what it's teaching us. All right, so when you guys have this written down, you can copy this so you have it. You are going to take a quiz. It's basically like this. It's going to give you a passage, and then you are just going to identify what type of text structure it is. You guys can use this to help you out. So use this as kind of like open notes type quiz. When you're done with the quiz, you are going to turn it in, and you're also going to turn in this text structure practice. So you get just a couple points just for following along, filling it in, getting it done. All right, so go ahead and get off, start the quiz. If you need me, I'm here.